further that we travel along our spiritual journey, and the deeper into the nature of reality that we are able to perceive, so too do the forces of manipulation ramp up. You would think that the more that we awaken, the easier it would be to actually see through all of the manipulation tactics that are around us. But actually, what ends up happening is they become more subtle. They become more sophisticated to the point where they can even become invisible. So today I'm going to be talking about one of the #1 most sophisticated manipulation tactics that is specifically used on awakening beings. And at the end of this video, I will share with you a real-life example of this tactic. The truth is, we are in prophetic times. So naturally, this age is rich with prophecy. We will find prophecy down every corridor that we travel when we're awakening. Prophecy is entirely different than predictions. Any person who has developed their intuition to a meaningful extent will be able to read potential outcomes or receive premonitions based on the available energies. But prophecy is in a much more all-encompassing category. It's those preordained staple pieces that foretell the fate of an age. Prophecy and destiny are linked with one another. However, you can think of destiny as a healthy form of prophecy, one that is not bound by any form of dogma, but rather it holds the highest potential outcome within it. We are in a time period where the destiny of this age, meaning the highest outcome available within this era, is enlightenment. We can look at prophecy through certain paradigms or filters that we are interpreting some form of information through. For instance, if we are looking at a certain prophecy through a religious paradigm, we will interpret these times as being ones that contain mark of the beast and revelations and some sort of ultimate Messiah figure coming in to balance the natural scales of the cosmos. Interpret this same exact time period through a spiritual paradigm, then there's different filters that we would see the same exact events through. What this means is that prophecy is not as objective as we would like to think that it is. And prophecy is not as fixed as we think it is either. In fact, prophecy can be a feedback loop that maneuvers us into certain outcomes, and those outcomes could have been predetermined and just used as prophecy in order to maneuver us into that predetermined outcome. So in this way, prophecy can be used as a tool to lock us into certain paradigms and therefore keep that storyline going. So if we already subscribe to a certain prophecy and we're waiting for that timeline to play out and to come to fruition, it's possible for us to interpret everything that's happening within this time frame as coming to that pinnacle or that revelation point within that prophecy. That can be liberating, that can be disempowering, but that can also be masquerading as liberating, when in actuality, it's just the old paradigm remarketing itself as being a new paradigm. Either way you cut this cookie, the most important thing to realize when it comes to prophecy is that when you are spiritually sovereign, you are actually vibrating at a frequency that's above the playing field of whatever that prophecy is, meaning that you are no longer in a position to where you are determined and you are fated to play out that prophecy, but rather now you have reoriented the energies. So instead of you just receiving that prophecy, you are now creating a timeline and creating an outcome that puts that energy into the output to create a new timeline or whatever prophecy that timeline contains. And this is what true spiritual sovereignty is all about. It's not about having a prophecy imprinted onto your being so that you're a part of that timeline now and playing that version of reality out. It's about becoming a co-creator and a master of this reality so that now we are putting the input into reality. If a group consciousness or an entity wanted to maintain power and control over the masses for a longer period of time, then installing prophecy into the belief system and then having things that confirm that same prophecy play out at a later date would create a sort of effect in the masses to where it's confirmation bias, to where they're understanding that these things that are happening are put into a prophetic context already. That's no different than if an adult were to manipulate a child by saying that they can control the weather simply because they can tell that it's about to rain. So there's different ways that prophecy pulls us into its paradigm in order to get us to resonate with that timeline. And this is one of the things that people in the spiritual community are learning how to navigate and are being called to up-level their discernment with. Because there are so many high vibrational beings that get pulled into a paradigm because of prophecy and then start entraining their perception into that belief system rather than transcending that whole groupthink and transcending that belief system altogether. You see, where prophecy vibrates at, it's not necessarily the most awful place. You can look at it like a stepping stone or like a stair on a staircase along our evolutionary journey. These different belief systems that entrap so many high vibrational beings are also meant to be the training grounds, or even a rite of passage that we learn to expand our consciousness through. We cannot cultivate discernment in the first place if we are not given the trials and the tribulations that we are meant to outgrow and that are meant to be the fertile soil for our evolution. The issue is when we never outgrow these stages of consciousness and these phases along our journey. And we just end up in training into that same prophecy and then feeling as though we have become fully awakened and feeling as though we have liberated ourselves and are actually vibrating at a state of spiritual sovereignty when we're not. The best way I can put this in layman's terms is that prophecy is for the sheep. Now we are in times of ascension. What that means is that there is a spiritual evolution in consciousness that is taking place in the human collective here and on Gaia. But when prophecy enters the picture, what that means is that there has already been a predetermined outcome to that ascension, and that there's already been a predetermined outcome to that creative evolution. And if our evolution is creative, that already means that is not predetermined, and that it already has not been set in stone or created. If it is creating, it cannot be created. When we access our spiritual sovereignty, we are no longer predetermined by any prophecy, even if it sounds like a very liberating prophecy, because if we know about whatever prophecy it may be, if it's solar flares that are gonna up-level all of humanity in the year 2025, whether it's the Kali Yuga, whatever prophecy it may be, then you can sure as hell bet that the powers that were know way more about whatever prophecy that was. And because of that, it can be used against us. Even something as liberating and beautiful sounding as solar flares coming to Earth and having everybody instantaneously enlightened. That in and of itself can only ever support our own evolutionary process. It would never be able to override a being's free will and shift our consciousness into its alignment. Solar flares cannot make everyone become conscious. They can only support us by giving us the upgrades we need in order to embody higher frequencies. They can disturb a person just as much as they can support us. If a person is not in alignment with awakening and the ascension process, basically, if a person is not in alignment with the spirit of this age, which is enlightenment, then the same energies can be too much for a person to process. It can act on a person's consciousness in a self-destructive manner due to the amount of entropy that they hold. But there is a higher truth at play here, at least if we want to access liberating prophecies or liberating timelines with all of this ascension energy that the universe is supporting us with. And that is the less optimal timelines that all contain prophecy. You know, the ones that have real bad vibes. They're all carrying out some sort of mark of the beast type activity or something that sounds very empowering in a religious tone but ends up just being enslaving. All of those versions of prophecy are actually trying to lock us into its energy field. But the higher versions of prophecy, the ones where there's actually things going on that sound of an ascension nature and sound very super liberating, those prophecies are actually waiting on us. You see, it's the other way around. They're dependent on us. We're not dependent on them because prophecy is not about a date on any calendar. In fact, any time that we resort to a date on a calendar, we have completely lost the plot. And this is what so many spiritually awakening beings are understanding. And this is why the more benevolent sources of channeled information will never give you a set date. And that's because in order for some sort of reality to come to fruition, which is the end game of a prophecy, that would entail us, the collective that is perceiving that prophecy, being of a certain vibrational range. In other words, we would have to be a certain version of ourselves that is operating at a certain level of consciousness already in order for us to be a vibrational match with that reality that has come into fruition. And in order for us to do that, we would need to have become a version of ourselves that has fully cultivated discernment. Once we have fully cultivated discernment, we're now able to no longer be predetermined by prophecy. So you see, the issue is that we're waiting on prophecy to manifest, kind of like a carrot in front of a mule that we're aiming towards, when actuality, prophecy is waiting on us to become the version of ourselves that would create that positive outcome. And that is why we are given prophecy after prophecy after prophecy and let down by it. It's trying its best to wake us up out of the level of reality where we're dependent on a prophecy. It's trying to break our heart so that we can start cultivating the discernment we need to become a truly spiritually sovereign person, because that is the version of ourselves that will perceive and be able to be a vibrational match to that timeline. And that version of ourselves is not dependent on prophecy. And so, you will not find the fruition of prophecy in any year that you bet your money on and that you place all of your energy in. And that's because the higher potentials of prophecy, the ones that hold the highest potential and the ones that contain the most optimal outcomes for our sovereign being, are all based in divine timing. And divine timing is not any date on any calendar. Divine timing is whenever the conditions are ripe. And when the conditions are ripe, that is when that prophecy, that liberated outcome will manifest. And so divine timing, we can only call forth through throwing away whatever prophecy we were putting our whole paradigm and our perception through. And by cultivating discernment to raise our consciousness above whatever paradigm of groupthink that we are currently stuck in, so that we can be a vibrational match to divine timing. Divine timing can mean 200 years from now. It could mean 10 years from now. It could mean tomorrow, because divine timing is not responding to the construct of time. It's responding to us and our vibration. So if we're a spiritually sovereign collective now, then the prophecy manifests now. So if you're waiting for solar flares to come to change humanity, you're going to keep waiting for more time periods of solar flares to come to change humanity. And if you're waiting for the Kali Yuga, which definitely ends in 2025, but anyways, then you're just going to keep waiting for the Kali Yuga to end or waiting for the Kali Yuga to start, whichever calendar dates you subscribe to. If you're concerned with cyclical cataclysm, congratulations, you have manifested a timeline where there's cyclical cataclysm, and so forth. All of these different prophecies, it's not so much that they're not based or rooted in any type of objective reality. What's actually happening is they're a call to action when it comes to this ascension age that we're in. Because when we're dealing with ascension, we have so much energy from the universe that is supporting us in our sovereignty. So it's not that prophecy is a bad guy, it's that it's here to help us awaken out of its own structure. A few examples of how the universe has helped us awaken out of the realm of prophecy by letting us down has been the 2015 stock market fiasco that was supposed to come crashing down and ruin all of civilization, as well as what the Ascension Community has long awaited, which is literally called the event, which has not come to fruition, as well as how every 4th of July now we wait for certain political figures to come down from the sky and save us all from ourselves. So I can go on. The list is endless of how prophecies have yet to come or that we're still waiting on because that time has not come yet. But either way you cut this cookie, it's gonna be the same. And that is divine timing is dependent on us. And what is holding us up at the moment is waiting on divine timing. So, while divine timing is ever so patient with us, it's important to know that moving forward, prophecy will ramp up, and so will the sophisticated levels of manipulation behind that prophecy. Always knowing that whatever we know, whatever dates we're waiting on, the powers that were know those same exact dates, and they will maneuver us into some sort of paradigm that's very similar to whatever we're waiting on. So don't wait on them. It's best to just be the spiritual sovereignty that is already living through the golden age if you want to wait for the golden age. Or be the version of reality that is taking actions to be in an ascended state of being rather than wait for that. There's a very passive energy and also a powerless energy that gets attached to prophecy. So on one hand, we become super passive, as though we are not active at all in or engaging with that prophecy, which is a passivity program from the false light that is specifically placed on humans so that we don't take actions and we don't step into our sovereignty. Or there's this limited energy, this paradigm that comes from a powerlessness that is attached to that prophecy, as though there's some sort of inevitability that we just have to play out. And all the while, the universe is giggling at our waiting, at our man-made dates, at our absolute faith in Princess Diana, just waiting patiently for us to become divine timing. I hope this has liberated you from prophecy. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakenings. See you next time.